ESPN Esports. We are live on Twitch, on Twitter, the ESPN app, and YouTube. This is the second edition of Coach's Corner, where we shine a spotlight on the coaches of the Call of Duty League and dive into exactly how they treat coaching their teams and going into it at a granular level. If you're a fan of understanding how coaching works, particularly Call of Duty League, this is definitely the show for you. We got Sender. He's the head coach of the Chicago Huntsmen, and this is going to be a very interesting conversation because the Chicago Huntsmen are a veteran team. They have a lot of proven commodities on that team, a lot of champions, and so it's going to be a lot of fun talking to you, Sender, about how you approach putting this team together and also just coaching them and keeping them motivated. How you doing? How is everything right now? How are you keeping safe? How is everything?
Everything's going pretty well. I have no complaints personally. Just really happy to be a part of the show. Thank you guys so much for having me on, and just excited to dive deep into the questions.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk life first. I mean, obviously everyone's social distancing right now. How are you? How's your health? And the team as well?
I'm doing good. The whole team's doing good. We're just making sure we're taking the right precautions to keep everyone healthy and safe. The only time I really think anyone's leaving the house is to mainly just do content with the team, and that's only like 5-10 minutes away from where we're living at, most of us. So besides that, like, everything's good. Like, no complaints.
How much Warzone are you guys playing? I think I saw you playing with Scump earlier. How much are you guys playing?
Maybe a little bit too much Warzone, but it's definitely worth playing. It's a lot of fun. Just except for the hackers, man. Besides that, it's been a great time.
I'm not at a level to experience that just yet, but man, when I get good, I can't wait to get my first hacker death. Boy, it's going to be a lot of fun. Well, if anyone has any questions on how to get good at Warzone, I'm also monitoring the Twitch chat, so you can feel free to throw in some questions. We got a lot of good questions on Twitter for Sender as well. Let's start here, though. The news came out today that Modern Warfare 2 will be remastered, and it's coming out tomorrow. This is according to a PlayStation Store listing in Germany. If I'm not mistaken, you started professionally with Modern Warfare 2 in 2009, right?
No, that was like kind of just when I started playing CoD in general for the most part, besides World at War. I started like competing a lot more professionally starting in like Modern Warfare 3, Black Ops 2 era.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, if it manages to have a multiplayer, that'd be a great time, but I think just for now it's just the campaign. So
it's listed in your CODpedia, but there's a segment on YouTube that I love called Wikipedia Fact or Fiction. There's 3 game related ones in yours that I would love to get fact or fiction about. It actually says Sender's favorite Call of Duty game is Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say that's really accurate.
Okay. Sender's first video game was Super Smash Bros. Melee for the Nintendo GameCube. Is that accurate?
I wouldn't say that's like my first game. My first console I ever had personally was a Sega Genesis, and I used to play a lot of just like the old bootleg games on there. I think one of my favorite games growing up was probably Sonic. But just growing up, I think Smash was like the first game that was kind of competitive because I would always like play against my brother or my friends, and it was always like really heated, but it was a lot of fun.
Were you a Sonic guy over a Mario?
Yeah, personally I was just growing up. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. It's funny how like in that era you would pick one console, right? Like you couldn't have both. You had to be either a Genesis person or a Super Nintendo. You couldn't be caught dead playing Mario and Sonic. No, absolutely not.
My brothers were like huge gamers growing up, and that's like the reason why I got into it, but they basically, like, my parents spoiled them. Like they got basically any console they wanted. Like that was like, it was like we didn't have like that much money growing up to like just spend on like things like that, but when it came to like video games or anything like that, like that was the one thing they would always get them.
The third thing, this is in the trivia section of your CODpedia. This is the last one. It says Sender's favorite moment is beating Vanquish 3-0 at UMG Dallas. Is that correct?
I feel like I remember filling these out, and I think I filled them out like after that tournament. So I was just kind of riding the high, but I mean, now obviously it's not my favorite moment, but it was definitely up there at the time.
What would you say is your favorite moment now?
And I don't know. I think the most memorable moment I have is probably getting top 2 at the Season 3 Ghost Playoffs event, just because of how much it meant to me. And around that time, I was going through a lot of problems with like just family and just money. So at that time, it was just like, it felt super good. And like, that was the time I needed like that confidence booster.
When did you, let's talk about your coaching career. So when did you decide, you know what, coaching is for me. I want to really give this a try.
I think I personally never like thought of that until I got the opportunity presented to me. Because at the start of Black Ops 4, I was in kind of a dicey spot. I was playing with some people that I thought like they were pretty good players, but I didn't genuinely feel like I could do like super well with them, like with the roster that I had. And I got an opportunity after getting like second in a 2K to help coach Jordan's new team, because I was on his team literally almost the whole year prior, and it just didn't work out after that year. We had a bad placing at champs, so we kind of just went separate ways. But he offered me an opportunity to coach and get paid the same as the players at the time. So I was honestly debating it, because I knew taking that step is pretty detrimental to a playing career. And I don't think that I'm truly done playing yet until I obviously, like, because I've been playing for so long, I know when I should stop. So, but I managed to take that leap mainly because of a financial factor at the time. I felt like what I was playing for at the time, it just wasn't worth the risk anymore. So I got an opportunity to coach E6, and after I would say like a day or two of deliberation, it was like a week and a half before the first Black Ops 4 event of that game, and I just took the offer.
How was that first year when you look back on it now?
I learned a lot. For me personally, there was a lot of growing for myself and the players that I was coaching, because a lot of the players I was coaching didn't have any like real experience in like being in like a pro league setting, or just like being a pro in general, or like playing COD. Because like at the time, that's when Frosty first transitioned. I was coaching Kisbeh, who's like a up and coming player at the time, and obviously Jordan, Cade, and Diabolic at the time were veterans, but they were not super outspoken besides Jordan, and Jordan felt like he had a really heavy load. So for me, learning to help those guys, like I was teaching them a lot of stuff that I feel like I was learning like as I went, and wish I applied to myself when I was playing. But it was hard to really notice that when I was playing, because it's from such an outside perspective that it's hard to, just pinpoint when you're like super focused on improving every day, and like the little like nuances that would make you significantly better, I never really like taught myself.
Jordan's in the chat, by the way. He has a very serious question for you. He says, how do you not get nervous and hit your shots when it's too cold in the venue? Let me know, because I need to stop shaking on LAN.
Dude, anything Jordan puts in the chat, please don't read.
That's it. Respecting that from the record. No, Jordan. He's out. Moderators, ban him from the chat. Yeah, exactly. So joining the Huntsmen, though, was interesting for you. Kind of came around last minute for you, right? Because you had like a decision to make at that point in time. Like, how did you decide that Chicago was the right place for you?
I decided Chicago was the right place for me because during the off season, I was mainly trying to stick with Jordan with whatever roster or whatever franchise he became a part of. And obviously he was trying to be a starter, and I was trying to be the coach of whatever team he started on. So we're kind of trying to approach franchises as like a package deal in a sense. And long story short, it just wasn't working out the way we expected it to, especially after champs last year. And going forward, like there was a point in time where I was going to join a different organization, and I had a couple different offers, but I wasn't really like super thrilled about it. And then I got offered this like when I was already kind of coaching the team, like literally, and within a day, I basically was like, okay, well, I'm interested. Like I haven't signed a contract or anything, and like it was all verbal. And obviously, I respected the team I was going to be a part of, but for me, like this, I was going to get paid more here. I'd be able to keep living where I was living. Like the roster's super talented across the board. Like it was like a no-brainer for me personally.
You keep mentioning Jordan. What is it about sticking with Jordan? Making sure your careers are intertwined. Why is that so important to you?
It's important to me because I feel like he's super underrated in the community, and he's a really good player in like every aspect. Like I personally have had very, very few problems with him, like ever. And I've known him for like years. So for me, it's kind of similar to like my relationship I had with Diabolic, because I was teaming with him for like on and off like 6 years. And I feel like Jordan was just like a much more skilled version of Diabolic in a sense. So I felt like keeping that potential like alive is what I wanted to mainly achieve.
So let's talk about the roster then. I mean, General's currently a substitute on a stacked Chicago Huntsmen roster, right? You got Scump, Formal, RC's, Envoy, Gunless. I mean, those are 5 giant names, and all of them essentially have pedigree in Call of Duty, in CWL, obviously, championships under their belt. Like, when you joined this team and you looked at that roster, like, how did you approach coaching this? Because a lot of those players had so much experience that you were coming in relatively based on your coaching stints, right? Yeah, you were newer compared to the players that were already there. So, like, how did you build that vibe and that sort of rapport as a coach with these players?
I respect the way you presented that. I'll just say that. But I mean, for me personally, I already had a relationship with everybody on the team, whether it was like, you know, I've known them for a while, like Gunless, for example, like I was friends with him like while he was on his come up. And I know he respected me a lot because a lot of things back then I was teaching him like how to improve and how to be a better player. I'd play him a lot, and he was just a good friend. And like Envoy, for example, like I've competed with him, like against him for years, and I didn't really know him personally, but I knew his work ethic from last year, and I knew he was just a super talented player. And when it comes to Formal, I've known Formal for years. Like Scump, I've known for years. Like all these guys on this team, like I respect highly, and they respect me, and I feel like it was just a good fit. Like regardless of like, you know, like obviously they're literally like the best COD players to ever play, and for me personally, like I've never really thought of it being an issue at all. And like I understand your question, and like some people look at it like that because obviously, you know, from a different perspective. But for me, it was never like, oh, I don't think these guys are going to respect me. It was more like, okay, I can definitely help these guys improve as a team.
So let's talk about it from a coaching standpoint, putting the respect aside. We will assume, and it's clear that the respect is there. So when you have these kind of players, what percentage of the time are you working on them based on what they're doing in the game versus how much are you dealing with how they interact out of the game, you know, relationships, etc.? Like, what is the breakdown of your coaching like?
Well, out of the game, like I don't really have to do anything like that because these guys already have a relationship with each other. So it's mainly just in-game things. Like for me personally, it's like mitigating like arguments that happen. Like that's not too hard with these guys. Like, yeah, they can get hot-headed sometimes, but at the same time, they all have the same goal. They're all super passionate to win. So when it comes to like actually critiquing, like we all have the same mindset in that aspect. Like for me, like not many people know me as a competitor because obviously like I didn't win championships and I wasn't like a part of like the biggest teams, but I was pretty toxic on some of the teams I was on, not in a way that was like a bad environment. I just expected a lot from the players I was with. So I would constantly, you know, hound people for making mistakes. I would constantly like, you know, I was just really trying hard to be the best teammate I could be to try to get the most out of my teammates. And to some people it might come off as like I'm being too demanding or anything like that. But for me, it was just like, you know, that I just wanted to win super bad. And I know these guys are trying everything in their power to improve every single day. I'm not going to have to hound them to like be passionate about trying to get better. Right. So for me, it's super easy trying to coach these guys and get them to improve because they listen to what I say, and whether they do it or not, it's not because they don't listen, but there's a lot of information to try to retain that, you know, if you're in the heat of the moment, like it's hard to remember every single little thing. So
what is tell me about the vibe of the team right now. And here's why I ask this. Leading up to Minnesota especially, there was a lot of attention paid. I know that Hex was involved in creating the series. The name escapes me, but basically the video series leading up to opening weekend, there was a lot of attention put into that series.
The campaign, I believe.
The campaign, yeah. There was a lot of attention there about, Scump and Formal, are they getting along, the big reunion, blah, blah. But then when I asked them, they're like, no, we're fine. Everything is cool. We're professionals. Our relationship is great. And then the Huntsmen were winning. And obviously everything is great when the team is winning.
Yeah.
But then you suffer a setback. You lose to Florida in Atlanta. And so I'm wondering, like, what is the vibe of the team now after we've seen ups and downs this season with this team?
I don't think anyone on the team really thinks about that loss at all. Like, we all know that was just a series for us. Like, that weekend was like, it wasn't the best display of COD like I've seen from them at all. Like, but at the same time, like, they know the mistakes they're making, and like, it's hard to pinpoint it on one single thing. But this game is like super back and forth with a lot of these teams. If another team's playing their best, like, it's really going to come down to the day. And like, my job for the most part is just making sure that every single little mistake they make is like just the percentage of mistakes they're making is just lowered. So I don't really see them caring that much about that loss. Like, I think just every single day they're just trying to improve and get better. If you hang your head on one loss, like, it's just gonna affect you the next day and the next day and the next day. I think there's some days where our practice isn't the best, and the days that our practice isn't the best, it's because it's all mental, right? So I feel like with these guys, like, the one thing we could work on is just our mental fortitude when we're scrimming online, and I think that in turn will directly correlate with more consistent results in the tournaments that actually matter. So.
And I don't want to harp on that one loss. There is one thing I do want to ask, though. That was also the first time we saw our cities and Prestini play each other, right? And so I'm wondering, from a coach's perspective, did you have any because this was such an emotional moment. We saw it afterwards, right? They were both like despondent on stage afterwards. This was emotionally draining for both of them. And I had a chance to speak with them too, and I really felt that when I was talking with them. How did you approach that? Like, did you have conversations with our cities beforehand? Like, was there any sort of consideration taken into this that might affect gameplay, or just like putting him into the right mental state? Like, as a coach, how did you deal with that situation going into that game?
For me personally, like, I already know the mental state of the players going into every series just based on how they're acting prior to it. I don't think after the loss, I don't think he was as mad about like losing to his brother. He was just mad about losing. And I think a lot of people got that kind of mixed together. And I feel like with these guys, like I said, they're all super passionate. So losing to anybody is going to be annoying, and like there's going to be some drama behind it. But at the same time, I don't see that as like something that he hangs his head for. Like, he's a super confident guy, and he's not going to let something like that be like, like have any negative effect on him for the most part in the long term. Like, I don't think he definitely was mad about the loss and like losing to his brother, but he wasn't mad about losing to his brother. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely got that vibe. Like, he was happy for his brother. He was just more upset that his team
He lost. Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Did you share any words with him? Like, whatever you can tell us. Like, did you share words with him afterwards? Like, what was the first conversation like with him after that?
Well, after the match, we all went outside, and I'm pretty sure he had to do the interview on stage, and then he had to do like another interview. For the most part, like, we were just talking about the loss. Like, we didn't talk about that at all. Like, it didn't seem to be on his mind at all, and we just wanted to make sure that every single thing that we messed up in the match got fixed, and just move forward from that.
Here's a question from chat, actually, that sort of ties into this, just basically talking to the players and giving them constructive criticism. This is from Yuko, who says, and I apologize if I mispronounced that username, how do you, Sender, approach constructive criticism for your players so that they don't take it negatively?
I'm super specific on the criticism I give. I try not to be vague at all, because that doesn't help people improve. So I feel like the way I say, or the way I basically give criticism, like, I don't give it with an attitude. I just say it straightforward. And I mean, anytime there's an argument, they're not arguing because like, I give them attitude. They're arguing because they have a different perspective. And there's a lot of people that get mad when they feel like people aren't listening to them when they're giving criticism. But at the same time, I just try to retain the information they're telling me and find a good middle ground to make sure that we're all on the same page. I think for me personally, like, I've always been super good at giving criticism, and that's something that's never really, been a problem for me personally. And, like, I think a lot of people respect me for that too, the people I've teamed with in the past.
Speaking of criticism, one of the things that people are talking about now, obviously, is the possibility of the Call of Duty League going online based on the world that we live in right now. And people are sort of reordering their top teams, putting Dallas ahead just based on their scrim results, and having mixed reactions about Chicago. What do you say to those people that have criticism about Chicago's scrims and how they might perform in an online league moving forward?
I'm not really too, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this because I do think my team's going to perform regardless. Like, maybe it's not the same caliber as it would be on LAN, but it's not like my team's going to go into a match and just blame it on online. Like, they're going to go into the match pretending it's a LAN match. They're going to go into the match being just as prepared as they would be on LAN, have the same kind of mental state. And if we lose a couple fights that we would have won on LAN and that just, like, ends up being the result of the game, like, that's going to be unfortunate. But at the same time, I know all my guys are super confident. And when it comes match day, they're always ready to play.
What have your players said about a possible online Call of Duty League?
In what aspect?
Like, what are their reactions, and what is also your reaction to the possibility of the league moving completely online?
Nobody's thrilled about it, definitely. But at the same time, like, you got to make do with what you got, and you know, if everyone's playing on the same kind of thing, and as long as there's no issues like external from just, you know, ping or whatever, like, I don't personally feel it's gonna dramatically change results. Like, I think the same teams are still gonna be placing on top. I do think some of the teams that made changes might be a little bit better online than the LAN, but for the most part, I think it's gonna be relatively the same result-wise.
Okay, so let's just assume that this is going to happen. We don't have any official news. We don't know. I don't know anything on my end. Let's just assume that we will get an announcement at some point that Call of Duty League is going completely online, just like Overwatch League, League of Legends, etc. Now, when you hear that news, how will you digest that? How do you approach preparing your team for an online format? Scrims matter a lot more. How do you pick teams to scrim with? How do you navigate those waters so that you optimally prepare your team for this format?
I just try to make sure they scrim teams that we're not going to be playing at the event, or teams that I feel like we are not at a disadvantage against in scrims, based off like the connection that we're forced to play on sometimes. Because I want to make sure, obviously, these guys are staying confident in their gameplay. Because, you know, if you go into a tournament match not like confident in your gameplay because of like previous scrim results, like, that's going to come back to bite you. So I just try to get a mix of really good practice while like making sure we don't play on hosts that, you know, don't favor us at all. And, you know, we've done that from time to time, and it's just not very beneficial to the team, like, trying to get better. So I don't know. I think for me, we just got to make sure that we're keeping our heads in the game when we're scrimming online more. I think that's like the biggest factor for this team in particular.
I asked this question to Saint of the Rocker last week. I want to ask you as well. He mentioned that from a coaching perspective, he would rather have games spread out across the week so that he had more time to prepare, whereas his players would probably want to get them all done as quickly as possible. What would an optimal schedule, online Call of Duty League schedule, look like for you as a coach?
If they're keeping the tournament format, I think doing what they're doing is fine. You know, just having like a couple matches on Saturday, a couple matches on Sunday. Like, I don't really see that being too much of an issue. If it were to transition to league matches, I do like basically the one match a day system. I do think that it does give you a lot more time to prep and makes the match feel a lot more important. So just because you're not going to show up for a tournament match doesn't mean you shouldn't show up and, you know, not go just as hard. Because if you show up for one match a day and you feel like you're just kind of shrugging your shoulders, playing it out, and just go with the motions, like, you know, it's not going to work out. Like, and if you have to play multiple league matches in one day, I feel like that can carry over and just create really bad momentum for some teams.
Call of Duty League has been very good at listening to fans and players in making some changes, including changing to the tournament format after inaugural weekend, right? And I'm asking your opinion on this. If the league goes online, if and when the league goes online, what format would you prefer in an online scenario?
I mean, I do probably prefer just a league match format if it's online, because I don't think tournaments should be played online when they're supposed to be on LAN. You know what I mean? So for me personally, I do think if we're going to an online format, I do prefer league matches.
Let's get to some questions. I saw a question earlier in chat from Philly fan. We did talk about earlier in the interview, but there will be, we will post this interview after the fact, so you can rewatch it and get your question answered there about coaching the likes of Scump and Formal. I will get some questions from Twitter, or take some questions from Twitter here, because we've got some good ones. This one is from Me Haley B, who asks, what are the best ways to improve movement in this particular COD release? In Modern Warfare, what are some of your tips, Sunder?
I mean, basically, you got to start slide canceling on this game if you're running a submachine gun at the moment, and to do that, you just got to work on slide canceling and just being on point with that. I feel like a big way I try to improve my movement is I just try to get as many reps of doing it as possible, and just making sure that your centering is really good doing it. So whether you play like just free for alls, or you're scrimming, doing whatever you're doing, just mainly focus on that and like moving around the map. Make sure you're using your environment really well. Do you think that's probably the best way people can improve their movement? Because you don't want to have super good movement looking like an idiot on the map running down the like so you just want to make sure you learn the maps well, you learn all your environment around you. You're trying to work on your centering as you're approaching like certain situations.
This one is from Fire Inflammable. Do you watch amateur matches for possible future recruitment? If so, how, when, and where? How much of that occupies your time watching amateur matches?
I'm gonna be honest right now. I'm not too worried about that. There were some points last year where I was watching the amateur matches, but at the moment, the only amateur matches we really get are like our scrims versus teams that aren't in the league. So other than that, I don't really scout too hard. I do have some people I know that are amateur players, and I try to keep up with the scene in that way. But it's really hard to be able to watch amateur players right now, so I'm not too focused on scouting at the moment.
This is a good question from chat, actually, from Mighty74. With so many proven top players in the world on your team, Mighty74 asks, who is the vocal leader on the team from the scrims that have been streamed? It appears to be Envoy and Gunless, but what impact do they have on the rest of the team?
Well, yeah, I would agree it is Envoy and Gunless part. I think the impact they have on the rest of the team is that we have players on the team that are really good listeners, and you don't want to have 100 communicators on one team, because that would just flood communication. There's going to be no one truly listening and no one trying to like make the correct play from listening. So I do think we have a super good contrast in that aspect. And I don't know, like besides that, like I don't really see that being an issue at all. Like I think having like two set good communicators in a 5v5 format is more than good to try to hold the team up and make sure everyone is on the same page about certain things.
Sender's the head coach of the Chicago Huntsmen. You've been very gracious with your time. I'm going to leave you with this one last question. This is kind of a fun one. You can take it any way you want. This is from Twitter from Kuwaita, who says, if you could describe each of your players in one word, what would it be? Feel free to start with Jordan, by the way. I think he's still in the chat.
All right, well, Jordan's an idiot. But
great way to start. We're off to a flying start. Love it.
But Jordan's a beast. Like this kid's smart as hell, but he's an idiot. No, best word for Jordan, troll. He's just a troll.
Fair enough.
But to go through just adjective wise, like trying to think. So Envoy, I would say, in what aspect? Like as a player, as a person?
Yeah, you can pick any word, whether it's their personality, whether it's their play in the game,
okay,
whether it's their accomplishments. You can whatever the first word that comes to mind is even a better way to ask it.
Okay, Dylan, I would call, or Envoy. I think the word that comes to mind, he's a rat, and what I mean by that is like just the way he plays on the map. He's super sneaky. He's that guy that's super annoying to play. Sometimes you can't catch him. Like I would say, rat fits his play style super well. Damn, I'm trying to think of like the best words to describe these guys. I would say Matt is like probably. I would just say the word consistent. This guy always tries to go to the right spots. Always tries to do the right thing. Like I've never really had a problem with him in that aspect at all. And he's just really good at listening. So I would say those two things, listening, consistency, I always get out of him. Man, dude, all these guys, man. I would say
Scump. What's the first word for Scump?
He's a beast, man. Like,
Yeah.
I guess beast. Like this guy, like I feel like when he wants to go hard, he's an actual animal. Like this guy knows what he's doing at all times, and he'll always do his thing. I feel like as long as he's putting in the effort, I do think that's the biggest thing for him. I think Arsenal's is like honestly like I think the best word to describe is underrated. Like this guy's running basically every role in the game right now. Super good teammate. Like really good at communicating with his teammates. Like always tries to stay on top of things. Like this guy is an overall just like incredible player. I would say Pierce like Gunless. Gunless is this guy. I would say kind of in the same sense as Scump. I do think they're the two type of players that as long as they keep a level head and always stay focused on the game, both of those guys are just absolute tanks. So I do think, I guess those are probably the best ways I can describe it in like the smallest amount of words possible. But just one word adjectives, like I'm not too good at describing people. So
who's the funniest one on the team? Who's the one that brings the personality to the entire team?
I would say a combination of Scump and Arcides. Those two are like the main like vibes on the team when it comes to like, just trying to get people to laugh and, try to have a good time and, take some of the pressure off. But everyone has their moments on the team, genuinely. Like these guys are hilarious.
Well, we're looking forward to more great moments from the Chicago Huntsmen. Hopefully the league returns. We saw Team Arcides battle in an exhibition last night, and it just got the juices flowing, even watching that, being like, man, I really want Call of Duty League to return, however it will. But Sender, you've been very gracious with your time here. We thank you very much. Head coach of the Chicago Huntsmen joining us here on ESPN Esports Coach's Corner. Thank you for being here, sincerely.
No problem, man. Thank you so much for having me.
That'll do it for us here on the stream. You've been watching on Twitch, Twitter, the ESPN app, and YouTube. This is the second edition of Coach's Corner. It happens every single Monday. Don't forget, we have a whole string of live programming on Twitch. You can find us on Twitter at ESPN_esports. Lots to look forward to. Be safe out there. Wash your hands. Practice social distancing. And we'll see you next time.